Hello, everyone. Welcome to Living Your Best Life with Eddie Stone, founder and CEO of Touchstone Essential. Hello, Eddie. How are you?
I'm doing great, Perry. How are you this evening or this morning, I should say?
Very great and happy to have you here with us on the show again. So, how is everything?
It's great. It feels like it's been a couple of weeks, so I'm happy to have a chance to be on the show with you as well. We've been in the midst of getting ourselves ready for a mastermind conference coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's a busy time, which I really like the energy of preparation and seeing people getting ready to go and invest in their education and learn some new things. And so it's a great time of the year.
Uh-huh. Okay, and then I have a question waiting, okay, for because Maggie brought Byrne. She's like to ask you a question and to help her.
Sure.
Okay, the question is, do you have a treatment for Magellan? My friend has been diagnosed with what she has been told is scabies and she has constant itches and she cannot get rid of even though she has tried all kinds of medication for it. Maybe she has Magellan's. This has been going on for 8 months and no one can treat it. Can you possibly help my friend is suffering terribly? I'm wondering if zeolite would do it, but I think it's more than that. Thank you for your help.
Yeah. So I feel for her friend and appreciate that she wants to help. Morgellons is difficult because it's sort of a controversial diagnosis. A lot of times when individuals can't get real clear answers from medical professionals, that's sort of sort of a self-diagnosis they kind of fall into because they're just sort of uncertain. And I almost think of it as sort of saying, gosh, I'm sort of uncertain. I've got these skin issues. And so scabies is one of those things, sort of open sores. And I've met a few people that are struggling with it and they just itch like crazy. And they also have trouble like when they wear clothes, because sometimes the open wounds can be irritated and, they can go very long periods of time without any sort of relief or answer. So I'll tell you right up front, to the best of my knowledge, there's no real clear answers out there, and there's no real clear cure except perhaps time and trying to live as much of a healthy lifestyle as possible. Since I first heard about it years ago, there are individuals that will travel to the coast so that they can get into salt water on a regular basis. So on your skin, you have microorganisms, and I think on the show we've talked about the human biome several times. In our case, generally what we talk about with it is we're talking about the digestive biome, right? That's in your gut, in your stomach, and the role that those microorganisms play in terms of your immune system, digestion. I mean, there's even people that sort of attribute the microorganisms as almost being like a second brain, metaphorically speaking, in terms of helping to produce chemicals such as dopamine and others, and giving immune indications to the body to treat disease. Well, the biome on your skin, when you go to the ocean or you get in sunlight, can be very disrupted. And scientists have done tests with people that, like right on the beach before they go into the ocean water, and then again when they come out, and there's a real change that occurs in the biome. And sometimes for people with these skin issues that are somewhat undiagnosed, right, and they can't really find relief, they can go do something like that, and it sort of disrupts what's going on in their skin and may cause their immune system to have a positive response. Something like that has been shown with individual persons. Now, what we're talking about here are anecdotal stories, right? I don't know of anything clinical, but just individuals really desperate, something like getting in the sunlight, right? Almost like somebody with really challenging acne. They'll prescribe to them to get into the sunlight, right? Because there'll be a change in that vitamin D production can be impactful in a positive way to the immune system. So one way they might consider is thinking about it from a lifestyle standpoint. So, and then all of this, We always talk about trying to have as healthy a diet as possible, because at least in that way, they're giving their immune system sort of those basic nutritional tools to try to defend itself, right? And so if a person has this issue and they're also largely consuming an ultra fast food processed diet, that's not helping the situation. We can't directly say that a healthy diet will help, but we know it's less likely to hurt than if you're eating poorly, right? So lifestyle, being outside, they may find some relief from some essential oils, a dip in the ocean. There are things like calamine lotion, I don't know what that might be called in Thailand, that people can soak in tubs, and that can help out with itching. And sometimes if they can just not scratch themselves raw, that may help the sores on their body heal faster. Other individuals have found relief by going to physicians that will give them very high dosages of antibiotics, both for oral consumption as well as a topical application. And the idea being there that whatever on the surface of the skin is causing this reaction, that if you beat it back with an antibiotic, it can help. But again, it's more anecdotal, sort of people telling their personal stories, than anything I've ever seen that I would think of being any type of clinical or peer-reviewed work. I also know some individuals that have dealt with skin issues related to Lyme's disease and others that tell us, again, a personal story, that they have used the zeolite on sores, just like people tell us they get relief from the burning of a bite from a mosquito or something. And so there seems to be some relief that they feel when they spray it on there. But it, unfortunately, Pari, I think is a real trial and error situation. Now, the one thing that I've heard that seems to be consistent in all of this is individuals that are dealing with Morgellons and similar, they're in a sort of constant state of stress. And I think we could understand that, right? Because they're stressed about this condition that won't go away and no one can give them an answer. And most likely they're not resting very well, which can lead to this sort of chronic stress situation. I would say to anybody that's fighting something like this, finding a way to better manage stress. One thing they might consider is some type of meditation, because if they can ease their mind and sort of slow that stress reaction in the body, that also may have a positive impact on an overactive autoimmune system. And so rest, stress management, a decent diet, look at potential environmental solutions, sun, ocean water, find a physician if they can't get any relief in those manners that may help them with high dose antibiotics. And even essential oils may provide them some relief. But unfortunately, it's one of those situations where we're really talking about trial and error and just trying to find what works for them, more than saying specifically we know a specific answer for their problem. But my heart goes out to them, and hopefully they can find inside of that something that may give them relief.
Maybe by reboosting immune system, I think that might help some way, right? Because when people are ill or sick, because the immune system is not healthy, not strong enough.
Yeah, so the thing though about the immune system that people need to be conscious of, you want an immune system that's balanced and not overreacting. When you have an autoimmune problem, then the immune system essentially is overreacting and may in fact be causing problems in the body, either with organs, digestive issues. There's just all kinds of things. So immunomodulators are sort of a term that's thrown around, and immunomodulation really comes from stress management, proper diet, exercise, these kinds of things. So I encourage people to be cautious about immune stimulation unless a medical professional has really worked with them to figure out a recipe in that regard. I'll give you an example. There's a pretty significant drug called Humira, which I think was originally made to be used for cancer treatment. But essentially, as I understand its function, it works to tamp down an overactive autoimmune system that could be causing issues with RA, which is a type of arthritis, or all types of bowel concerns, which are really coming from the same thing, where the autoimmune system is causing problems for the body. And so you got to be careful with immune stimulation. And it's something that I'd tell a family member or anybody, make sure you're working with a medical professional, a scientist, somebody that knows what's going on if you're looking at things to stimulate the immune system.
Okay. I hope that helps, at least you can try.
Yeah, my heart goes out to them.
Okay. And today, what are you going to talk about it? Eddie?
Well, my daughter, I talked to her about the subject matter, and she said, "Oh, Dad, that's no fun." But what I want to talk about today is curbing a person's sugar addiction. And sugar is interesting, right? In a certain way, even as a child, sugar is kind of this reward, right? When a child behaves well, or maybe a parent's got a child out at a restaurant and the kid's being overactive, just being a kid really, and the parent says, "Oh, if you'll calm down and sit here, I'll give you this piece of candy." I even, in war situations, right, soldiers come across kids and they want to give them a piece of candy. It's a sign of, hey, I'm a good guy, or, sort of whatever happens to be. But sugar is also, particularly for adults and kids, if there's too much consumption, it's really detrimental to health. In fact, it's perhaps one of the greatest issues that we have if we sort of consider things that we know about that people should not overconsume. On a global standard, probably canola oil is one of the primary things people just should not be consuming because of its impact on cardiovascular disease and other issues. Sugar's that other one because it can create all types of metabolic disorders. And the sad reality is that most people are consuming really aggressive amounts of sugar, particularly in the developed parts of the world. I think the averages are around 75 to 78 grams per day. Now, that's a lot. That, to give people sort of a relevant way to think about that, that's about like, say, 19 teaspoons of sugar. And so and if you think of white table sugar or refined sugar, that's just a ton. And so here's some of the things that can happen: metabolic issues, which I mentioned, but obesity, type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is just this runaway issue around the globe now. Cardiovascular disease of really all types, acne. And adult acne particularly is largely coming from processed sugar in a person's diet. It makes a person more vulnerable to cancer. Probably most people that we talk to, because I think our audience is really in the know, realize that a high sugar diet can help to support cancer and contribute to risk associated with cancer. And sugar can even cause depression because it creates these temporary highs, then these incredible sags that people have. And so there's all types of problems that people have with it. And even though we associate sugar with energy, I think at the end of the day, it also can contribute to fatigue because it kind of wears down the system. Then, of course, we've all heard sugar can contribute to tooth decay. So that being said, that's my no fun statement of the night. But, we're all about living our best life. And this show and what you're projecting, Pari, is about people being healthy. And, what you've asked me to do is sort of help provide tools, for people to have a better, more healthy life. And so here's the things I would tell people. One, you'd like to control and be knowledgeable about the amount of sugar that's in your diet. And you might be surprised with how much you're getting, because when I talked about 75 to 78 grams of sugar per day, I'm not even talking about sugar that's coming from, say, fruits or vegetables. That's really not, we're not even concerned about that. I'm talking about really refined and sort of added sugars. So what are some strategies? And this kind of a way to think about this is, what can you hack or biohack, sort of this term we hear people talk about, in your life to help control that? One is, when you're eating, if you can sit down and think about eating the protein and the fat in your meal before you eat the carbohydrates, and certainly before you eat your dessert, then it's going to slow the rate at which sugar impacts your body, causing your glucose to rise in your bloodstream, and then the insulin response that comes from that. And that sort of fast rise of sugars from high glycemic foods, causing an aggressive insulin response, can actually cause people to want to have more sugar more quickly. And so I tell people all the time, if you're struggling a little bit, one of the first things you can try to do is to eat proteins and fats in your meal before you go for the breads, sugars in bread, or other sugary substances. And so that's one of those first strategies. And then the slower you can eat in that same regard, the better, because you give the body time to sort of get the signal, okay, we're getting some caloric satisfaction here, and it may actually reduce that desire for sugar. So you're doing that, then other things you can do is to think about your environment and your exposure to sugar. Here's a couple tips. One, never go to the grocery store, the convenience store, the bodega hungry, because you're likely to buy things that are sugary because merchants put those in real simple, easy places to grab as you're checking out. You're likely, if you're hungry, to choose bigger portions than you would otherwise. If you're extremely thirsty, you're likely to get a much larger, say, sugary soft drink than you would otherwise. And so trying to avoid shopping, when you're hungry is important. Think about how conveniently sugary things are available to you. As an adult, most of us have the ability to at least control what we keep at the house. And I know my wife and Maria, we're really conscious to not keep sugary snacks in the house because we're like anybody else, right? We'll go find them if they're there. And if we do find ourselves wanting to satisfy a sweet tooth, we'll buy an individual piece of a pie, not a pie. We'll buy a couple of cookies, not a bag of cookies. I would prefer it, if I'm going to have a little bit of a dessert, that when that dessert's gone, there's nothing else in the house. If you're shopping and you're buying the package of cookies and pies and these things, just know you're going to eat them, right? There's no way to avoid it. If you feel compelled to eat M&Ms, try to buy the smallest bag possible, right? You can help yourself by making access to sugary products and snacks inconvenient. And the more difficult and inconvenient they are to get to, the better off that you are. And then in contrast to that, if you're the kind of person, and I'll tell you right up front, I'm this person. So I need to eat a little bit at night before I go to bed. Now that's either now a habit at age 55, soon to be 56, or it just really is what my body needs. But I've sort of convinced myself over the years that I need a little bit of something in my belly before I go to bed, and I rest better. So I don't know if it's a physical response or psychological, but at this point it's who I am. So what I've learned to do instead of having sweets in the house is I'll have an apple, maybe some almonds. And probably some people listening go, well, that's no fun. And certainly when my kids lived at the house, I don't think they thought that was fun either. But you know what? After a while, that becomes very satisfactory. Consider this when you think about sugar and how serious the subject matter is. Most scientists that study these sort of behavioral addictions and things of that kind consider sugar nearly as addictive as cocaine. So just to put it in perspective, right? We hear about these serious drugs that people get addicted to and have to go to rehab. Sugar is not too far away from that for a lot of people. And you can look at people struggling with real morbid obesity and literally eating themselves to death. And you can see the impact of something like this. Along the way, products like hemp oil or CBD oil has proven to be also helpful with people sort of fighting these urges. There's research to suggest now that people going through heroin detox and treatment, when given CBD oil, find the symptoms and withdrawals easier to manage. I think we can sort of judge ourselves how that might help us too. If you're finding yourself fighting the hunger pangs of trying to give up on some sugars, we know in research that it's preliminary, but it's really quite promising that people trying to stop smoking also find relief in using something like CBD oil, which helps to relax the body. The way the CBD or the cannabinoids interact with the endocannabinoid system, they help to provide some sort of temperance to and balance to the stresses. So I encourage people use if you're a user of CBD oil and you find yourself stressing for a cookie, consider a couple drops of your CBD oil, because it may help you sort of tamp back the rate. And if you have to go slow, go slow. If you realize that you're carrying around more weight than you should, and your health is suffering because you're overeating and you're overweight, it's probably hard to quit cold turkey. So if you're used to 10 cookies a day, let's try 7. Let's recognize that it is an addiction. It is not biomechanically required by your body. There's plenty of energy from carbohydrates and the other foods that you eat. And so it really is either a mental or in some cases a physical addiction. So here's a few things I would just sort of add when you think about all of this, sort of give this a wrap up, is look out for sugar and carbohydrates. So sodas and energy drinks are notorious for sugar. And I would also caution you on things that substitute sugar with artificial sweeteners. Artificial sweeteners can be useful for some people that are type 1 diabetics, but consider that the body tends to rebound when given artificial sweeteners, and ultimately individual persons that eat a lot of artificial sweeteners find themselves finding other ways to get to sugar. If you're eating pastry products that are fat-free, most likely what they've done to make them desirable is they've upped the amount of sugar in those products. So be leery of things that are fat-free, because most likely they're high in sugar. So sodas, energy drinks. If you drink a lot of wine, just consider there's a heck of a lot of sugar in wine. And if you find yourself, hey, I want to have orange juice, I need orange juice, which has a lot of sugar in it, maybe try to put soda water in your orange juice. And so you cut it in half, right? So it's 50-50. I know when my kids were growing up, we didn't give them just straight apple juice. We would give them half water and half apple juice. You know what? They got used to that flavor and thought it was fantastic. Ice cream, snack foods, candy bars, all those things are obvious, but I just tell people to be careful. Breakfast cereals. A lot of times people don't realize how much sugar is in a breakfast cereal. And I'm not talking about added sugar. I'm talking about natively what's in there. Even things like ketchup or yogurt, unless you're buying non-flavored yogurt. So here's sort of my final tips thinking about those things. And I would imagine for most of our audience, that's pretty obvious. Learn to read labels. Learn to get into the habit to look at a label and not just look at its calories or its fat content. I'm not so concerned about that for people. Learn to look at the amount of sugar that's in the product, and then glance up and look at how many servings it's talking about. One of the tricks of big food is to disguise large amounts of sugar by taking a small soft drink or a small candy bar and saying it's 2 servings, when in fact no one would eat it in 2 servings. It's 2 bites. It's not 2 servings. But they'll indicate the sugar is broken down into 2 servings, so it doesn't look like much. But in truth, you're going to eat the whole thing. So be wise. I'm not going to say it's easy, and I don't mean to be anti-fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm certainly apt to have a dessert on occasion, but it's got to be managed, or it's going to cost you your health. And quite literally, if you're not careful, people can find themselves eating themselves to death with sugar. And so it's something to be cautious about.
Eating by eating sugar or sweet, it's like you said, like under drug addiction, because here sometimes people I heard, like when you lose your appetite, you eat sweet first, and then you feel like you get hungry, so you can eat meals, so that happened.
Well, and that's because the sugar causes your blood to spike the glucose, but then you make insulin to knock it down, and then the body's hungry, right? And in that regard, something that happens, and I bet you've seen this with people around you, people eat their feelings. As people are stressed or emotional, very often they can go to eat, right? In those situations, there are people that are dealing with obesity because of that very fact. And very often what they go for are sugary products. Getting a handle on, even for some people, they might need to go get counseling. They may need to see a therapist, because this is something that can kill you in the same way that an automobile accident, smoking, and other things can kill you. Excess amounts of sugar can do the same thing. And so it's something we need to really practice trying to have moderation with.
The thing is, many people knows about this, Eddie. Like, okay, sugar is no good for health, but they just can't control themselves. They get hungry and they need sugar, they need something. So, it's not easy just to to change the habit, it's not easy.
Yeah, Pari, I agree, my heart goes out to those persons, because I think it's difficult to get a handle on, but I just know if they can break that grip that sugar has on them, there's better rest, there's more energy, probably a longer, more fulfilled life. There's just a lot of positive things that come from it if they can break free.
Maybe one tip that I can share is when you're hungry, for sugar or for sweet, maybe take the fruit instead. Try to eat.
That's right, and water.
Yeah.
Right, and if people get bored with water, try soda water. Right, if you need some bubbles to liven up your water, do whatever you need to do to help you manage the situation.
And you know what? I am a person, I cannot eat anything before bed.
You can't?
I can't. I just can't. I feel like I will not be fine if I eat before bed. Just the opposite.
I have to say, my wife will go up and go to bed, and then it's me and the dog. And we just can't go through the kitchen without a little bit of a snack. But we've learned to manage it to be a reasonably healthy snack. But it's a habit that I have. But I luckily am able to control it, so it's not a sugar-focused snack.
And when you said, like, when people craft for sweet, okay, then you use hemp oil or CBD oil, you mean just before when we want to eat, or what?
Yeah, that's right. Because anything that helps to calm sort of the stress of the system, right? That's why they have found it in the smoking cessation stuff that I've seen. Those individuals that are addicted to nicotine, right? When their nicotine levels are going down, right? Normally they would go for another cigarette or whatever it happens to be. And when they don't have it, it's stressful, right? It's nervous tension, right? Probably some is just emotional because something they're used to, they're not going to have. But at the same time, it's also physical. When we know that hemp oil, CBD oil, can be a big help in sort of managing stressful situations. Use it in this situation. I think people would find a positive outcome in helping to try to control some of that impulsive eating.
So you mean we can use many times a day?
Yeah, that's right. Now, look, we need to be reasonable about it. But most individuals, if they were using 25 milligrams, 3, 4, even 5 times a day, no problem. They're not going to have any side effect from that. The body will waste out anything it's not really utilizing. And for most people trying to break an addiction like this, it's probably pretty short term, right? So it's probably not going to last forever to kind of break free of that habit of the sugar.
So there is no addiction by using CBD oil, hemp oil?
I haven't seen anything related to that. And if you go back, hemp oil actually has about a 10,000-year history. When the Chinese were growing it and using it to make pottery, sometime after that consumption came into the play. But the bottom line is we know a lot about hemp and cannabis and how it interacts in the body. And there's just nothing really to suggest anything about CBD or cannabinoids or cannabidiol is somehow addictive.
Okay. Great show, Eddie. Thank you so much for being here with us. Next time we were waiting for your next show with us. Okay, next time.
Thank you,
for
Pari.
today. A good night to you. ขอบคุณค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ บ๊ายบาย
Bye-bye.